In the quiet suburban town of Brooksville, the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of children playing echoed down the streets. But in a small, seemingly peaceful neighborhood, a dark scheme was about to unfold. It all started in the local hospital, where a woman named Clara Simmons worked as a nurse. Clara had always been known for her pleasant smile and caring demeanor, always eager to help the families who came through the doors. But behind that warm exterior, something much darker was brewing. Clara had been struggling with her own personal issues for years, feeling as though her life hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. She dreamed of having a family of her own, but after multiple failed attempts to have children, those dreams seemed out of reach. Then, one day, she saw something that sparked a dangerous idea. A beautiful set of twins, born to a black woman named Layla Williams. Layla was a loving mother, full of joy and excitement over her newborn children. The twins, a boy and a girl, were the pride of her life, a perfect symbol of her strength and resilience. But Clara, in her desperation, began to fixate on them, toying with a twisted thought in the back of her mind. She could make them hers. No one would ever suspect anything. After all, she was a trusted nurse. She knew how the system worked. The parents, Layla and her husband, would eventually go home, and Clara could just slip in quietly, switch the babies, and leave without a trace. It seemed so simple, so perfect. Her heart raced with the possibility, imagining herself finally having the family she so desperately craved. But what Clara didn't know was that Layla's husband, Malik, was more than just an ordinary man. He was the police chief of Brooksville, the very same police force that ran through the veins of this town, the one that kept everything in check. And Malik was no stranger to danger or confrontation. He was sharp, intuitive, and protective of his family. He had no idea that his wife and children were in immediate danger, but something in the pit of his stomach told him that today was different. Today, there would be no ordinary shift. As Clara prepared to make her move, she was blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Layla had just settled into a chair by the nursery window, her mind at ease as she watched over her twins, completely unaware of the nurse's sinister plan. But that was when Malik's instincts kicked in. He had just finished his shift at the police station when he received a strange call. The hospital. There was something off about the way the nurse had spoken to the receptionist. Something wasn't right. Malik didn't wait to ask questions. He grabbed his badge and gun, rushing out of the door with no hesitation. He knew something was wrong, and he wasn't going to let anything happen to his family. Inside the hospital, Clara was preparing to carry out her twisted plan, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. She had already found the perfect moment when the twins were briefly left unattended, nestled in their crib, and the hallway was quiet. All she had to do was take a step forward, and her life would change forever. But as she reached for the twins, she felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed down the hall, loud and forceful. Clara froze, her hand still hovering over the babies. It wasn't just any sound. It was the unmistakable sound of a man on a mission, and that man had arrived in a flash. Malik burst into the room, his eyes scanning the area with military precision. In that instant, Clara realized just how far she had underestimated the situation. She had no idea that Layla's husband was the chief of police, that he was a man who would stop at nothing to protect his family. The moment their eyes met, the tension was unbearable. The weight of their stares was enough to fill the room with electricity. Clara tried to act quickly, but Malik was already steps ahead. The sound of his voice filled the room, his tone low and commanding. "Step away from them," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Now." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She was caught. The plan she had so carefully constructed was falling apart before her eyes, and she knew she had only seconds to make a decision. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing against her chest, as panic surged through her veins. What would she do? How could she explain herself? And more importantly, how would Malik react? He wasn't just a man. He was the police chief, a man who could ruin her in a heartbeat. As the tension built, the silence was broken by the sudden sound of footsteps from outside the room. The door was pushed open slightly, and Layla's voice came from the hallway. "Malik, what's going on?" she called out, worry evident in her voice. "Is everything okay?" Malik didn't take his eyes off Clara. His body was tense, ready for any sudden move, but his voice remained calm. "Stay back, Layla. It's not safe." Layla hesitated for a moment before stepping into the doorway, her eyes darting from Malik to Clara, confusion written all over her face. But Clara wasn't going to be caught like this. She had one last card to play. And just as Malik was about to step forward and secure the situation, the phone in his pocket buzzed. It was a text message, an urgent one. Malik glanced at the screen, and for a moment, his expression faltered. There was something far bigger going on than just a simple hospital incident. Something that could shake everything he knew to its core. He glanced back at Clara. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear, but there was something else there, something he couldn't quite place. He took a deep breath, every part of him on high alert. As the seconds ticked by, the question lingered in the air. What was the nurse really after? And what had Malik just uncovered? The tension was unbearable, the answer still unknown, leaving everyone in a state of heightened uncertainty. What would happen next? Would Malik be able to protect his family in time? Or was this just the beginning of something far darker than anyone could imagine? The story wasn't over yet, and the twists were just beginning. Malik's eyes remained fixed on Clara, his mind racing as he processed what he had just seen. His body was trained for moments like this, high-stress situations where every decision counted. But this was different. His children, his wife. The stakes were higher than ever. And yet, Clara's frozen expression didn't seem to match the urgency of the situation. It was as though she was waiting for something, a signal, a way out, a moment to explain herself. But there was no time for explanations. Layla stepped closer to Malik, her instincts as a mother kicking in. She could feel the tension in the air, the way Malik's usually calm demeanor had shifted. "Malik, what's going on?" she repeated, her voice trembling now. "Why are you standing like that?" She was confused, but her concern for their children outweighed everything else. She was aware of the silence that had enveloped the room, the odd feeling creeping up her spine. Something wasn't right. Malik's jaw tightened as he tried to piece together everything. Clara, the nurse, had been kind and respectful in all his interactions with her. He had no reason to believe she was capable of such a drastic act. But what he saw now was undeniable. His thoughts raced back to the strange phone call he'd received earlier. It wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. His mind shifted to his training. First, control the situation. Then figure out the why. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving this hospital without understanding Clara's motives. "Layla, step back," Malik said firmly, his voice low but authoritative. "Something's going on. I need you to stay with the babies." His instincts told him Clara was more dangerous than she appeared, and right now, Layla needed to be out of harm's way. Layla hesitated for a second, looking into Malik's eyes, trying to gauge the depth of the situation. There was a cold certainty there, and it sent a chill through her, a warning she couldn't ignore. Clara, seeing the shift in Malik's demeanor, grew even more anxious. She knew that if the situation escalated, her carefully laid plan would be exposed. She was running out of options. She could feel her breath quicken, her hands trembling as she stood in front of the crib. She glanced back at the door, wondering if there was any way out. The walls of the hospital room seemed to close in around her, the harsh fluorescent lights above blurring her vision. But there was one last card she could play. Desperation flooded her thoughts. She was no longer thinking clearly, just reacting. Her heart raced as she opened her mouth to speak, her voice trembling. "Please, You don't understand. I I just wanted to help them, she said, the words tumbling out in a mix of guilt and pleading. They were supposed to be mine. I've never had a family. I just wanted to give them the life they deserve. Her words hung in the air, but Malik didn't flinch. He knew better than to let emotional manipulation cloud his judgment. But Clara wasn't done yet. You don't have to do this. I can disappear. No one ever has to know, she said, taking a tentative step toward him, her voice laced with a false calmness. You don't have to ruin my life. Please, just let me go. Malik's eyes narrowed. He had seen countless criminals try to plead their way out of a situation. But something about Clara's desperation felt different. There was more to her than just a nurse with a broken desire for motherhood. As he sized her up, a disturbing thought crossed his mind. Was she just a pawn in something larger? Layla stood frozen, her eyes now darting between Malik and Clara. She felt a knot twist in her stomach as she slowly processed Clara's words. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked at her husband, then back at Clara. It felt like a nightmare, the kind you never expect to find yourself in. But Layla had been through enough in her life to recognize that sometimes the truth wasn't as simple as it seemed. Clara. Layla's voice broke the tension, her tone filled with disbelief. You wanted to steal my children. Her words echoed in the room like a slap to the face, and for a moment, Clara's expression faltered, as if the weight of the accusation had just hit her full force. But she quickly regained control, her features hardening. I didn't steal them, Clara snapped, her composure slowly cracking. I was going to give them a better life. You wouldn't understand. You already have everything. I just wanted one chance to be a mother. Malik moved toward Clara, his eyes scanning her face for any sign of further danger. But before he could reach her, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a text message. It was a phone call. He hesitated for just a second, the weight of the moment pulling at him, before he answered. Malik. The voice on the other end was urgent. You need to come to the station now. There's a situation. It's about your family. His blood ran cold. His heart skipped a beat. What's going on? He demanded, his voice sharp. We can't explain everything over the phone, but it's bad, Malik. Real bad. Clara's eyes widened when she saw the sudden change in Malik's expression. She could sense the shift in the air, the new threat, but she couldn't understand it. Who could be more dangerous than her? What was happening? Stay here, Malik said to Layla, his voice now filled with a rare intensity. He didn't want to leave her side, but the call was clear. Something larger than Clara's scheme was at play. Something that tied into everything he held dear, and he couldn't ignore it. Without waiting for Layla's response, he turned and stormed out of the room, phone pressed tightly to his ear as his mind raced. Layla stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to think. She looked down at her twins, safe and innocent, unaware of the chaos swirling around them. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. Clara's desperation, Malik's urgency, and the unsettling call he had just received. The truth was becoming clearer, and with it, a horrifying realization. Their lives were far more intertwined with Clara's scheme than they could have ever imagined. The tension in the hospital thickened. As Malik rushed to the station, Layla was left with questions that couldn't be answered, and a sense of impending danger that she couldn't escape. As Malik rushed out of the hospital, his mind was on fire with questions. His grip tightened around the phone, the words from the police station still echoing in his ears. Something was wrong, something bigger than Clara's betrayal. He pushed through the hospital doors, his eyes scanning the parking lot for his car. But as he reached his vehicle, a black SUV screeched to a halt beside him. The door swung open, and out stepped a man Malik recognized instantly. Detective Harris, an old friend from the force. Malik, we've got a problem, Harris said, his face grim. This isn't just about Clara anymore. It's about a human trafficking ring. And Layla and the twins, they're involved. Malik's heart sank. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He didn't have time to process everything. His thoughts were already racing ahead, piecing together the puzzle. Clara was never just a nurse. She was part of something much larger. Malik was already calculating his next move, his every instinct screaming at him to get back to his family. He needed to protect them, but now it was more urgent than ever. As they sped toward the station, Harris filled him in on the details. Clara, despite her carefully crafted persona, had been working as a recruiter for an underground ring that trafficked newborns and children. The plan had been to swap Layla's twins with others under her care, then sell them off to wealthy families who couldn't have children of their own. It was a horrifying operation, and Clara had been involved in it for months. Malik's heart sank. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He didn't have time to process everything. His thoughts were already racing ahead, piecing together the puzzle. Clara was never just a nurse. She was part of something much larger. Malik was already calculating his next move, his every instinct screaming at him to get back to this family. He needed to protect them, but now it was more urgent than ever. As they sped toward the station, Harris filled him in on the details. Clara, despite her carefully crafted persona, had been working as a recruiter for an underground ring that trafficked newborns and children. The plan had been to swap Layla's twins with others under her care, then sell them off to wealthy families who couldn't have children of their own. It was a horrifying operation, and Clara had been involved in it for months. But now, the clock was ticking. The real mastermind, someone much more dangerous than Clara, was already aware of Malik's investigation. Someone with resources and power that could crush anyone in their path. Malik knew he had to get to Layla and the babies before they did. His blood ran cold as he realized how close the danger was. Back at the hospital, Layla stood by the window, her mind racing. She hadn't heard from Malik, and the silence was deafening. Every passing second felt like an eternity. She clutched the twins tightly, unwilling to let them go, even for a second. Her heart was heavy with the weight of everything she had just learned. About Clara, about the twisted plot that had been unfolding right under her nose. She could hear footsteps in the hallway, and before she knew it, Clara was standing at the door again. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Layla, I'm sorry," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "You have to get out of here. They're coming for you, for the babies." Layla's mind whirled. She wanted to scream at Clara, to demand the truth, but something in Clara's expression stopped her. For the first time, Layla saw the fear in her eyes. "Who's coming?" Layla asked, her voice shaking. "Who are you really working for, Clara?" Clara hesitated, then took a step closer. They know. They know what I tried to do. They know everything." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought I could escape, but I can't. I can't protect you. I never wanted this to happen. I just wanted to belong." Suddenly, the door to the room slammed open. Layla spun around to see Malik standing in the doorway, his face a mix of relief and determination. "Layla, get the babies," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We're leaving. Now." Without a word, Layla gathered the twins into her arms, her heart pounding. Malik was already pulling her toward the door, his eyes scanning the hall. But as they reached the elevator, a gunshot rang out from down the corridor, followed by shouting. Malik's instincts kicked in. He shoved Layla into the elevator, pressing the emergency button. "Get them to safety." "Now," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Layla's breath caught in her throat as the elevator doors slammed shut. She clutched her children tighter, her mind racing. Was it too late? Had they already found them? The elevator descended quickly, and when the doors finally opened to the parking garage, Malik was there, waiting for them. He didn't say a word, just gestured for Layla to follow. They moved swiftly, ducking behind cars, heading for Malik's vehicle. The world outside seemed to stand still as Malik opened the door for Layla and ushered her inside. As they sped away, Layla looked over at Malik, her mind still reeling from everything she had just learned. "What's happening, Malik? What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Malik's gaze remained focused on the road ahead, his jaw set. "We get you and the twins somewhere safe. We'll deal with the rest later." But deep down, Malik knew the battle wasn't over. Clara might have been just a piece of the puzzle, but the real enemy was still out there. The criminal network that had been operating in the shadows was vast and powerful, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. They arrived at a secluded safe house, a place where Malik could protect his family until the threat was neutralized. The house was quiet, the tension thick in the air as Malik stepped out of the car and surveyed their surroundings. Layla followed closely behind, her arms still tightly wrapped around the twins. Inside the house, Malik began making calls, coordinating with his team. As Layla settled the twins into a room, she sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of everything crash down on her. She had never imagined her life could change so dramatically in such a short time. But one thing was clear: her family was safe for now. Hours passed, and Malik returned, his expression somber. "We've got them," he said. "We've got the whole operation. Clara's been arrested, and we've taken down the rest of the network." Layla exhaled in relief, the tension slowly easing from her body. She couldn't believe it was finally over. But as she looked down at her children, her heart was full of gratitude and love. They were safe. They had made it through. And though the journey had been filled with fear and uncertainty, Layla knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever tear her family apart again. The night ended quietly. The danger had passed, but the scars from the experience would linger. As Layla looked at her twins sleeping peacefully, she realized that while the world could be cruel and unpredictable, the love of family was the greatest protector of all. She had her children. She had Malik. And together, they would face whatever came next.